Hello, and welcome to the 5th episode of the Rabe Creations Crochet Podcast. My name's Nicole, and I'm coming to you from Calgary, Alberta, here in Canada, where spring has finally sprung. So yeah, very, very happy that we're getting a little bit of a warmer weather. I think it's got something to do with the projects that I finished that I'll get into, sort of pushing it along. Anyway, it is wonderful to be here today with you. Thank you so much if you've chosen to come back and watch me again. As of recording this, I now have 75 subscribers and I am over the moon. Thank you so much to everyone who has hit that subscribe button and has decided that they would enjoy spending a little bit of time with me every 2 weeks as I talk about my passions in life. So thank you so much. And for any new viewers, welcome. I hope you find something here that you enjoy and that you too feel inclined to hit that subscribe button and join us every 2 weeks for a little bit of crafty crochet talk. So, let me see, where shall I go? I suppose into a little bit of a fangirl moment, a little bit of tooting my own horn, so to speak. I hate to use that term because I'm very proud of my accomplishments, and I have accomplished yet something again, and it does warm my heart. This crochet community is amazing. It's very open, it's very accepting, and I'm just so proud to be a part of it. So when people do reach out to me and include me in that community, it makes my heart swell. It makes my heart swell, not just with pride for what I've done for myself, but pride for our community as a whole. It's a great thing to be a part of, and I'm so glad and humbled to be a part of it. So let me get into my news. As I said a couple of podcasts ago, I had been contacted by a designer, Hannah, at the Crochet Cottage podcast, and she had asked to feature one of my pictures on her Ravelry pattern page, and I was very excited and very pumped and over the moon. Guess what? It's happened again. So this time it was Rohn, who is the designer behind many, many, many crochet patterns, and I have done a number of his socks now. And he did contact me, or perhaps it was his people. I'll be honest, it might have been his people, but I was contacted through Ravelry, and they have asked if they could use one of my pictures on their pattern page on Ravelry. So the picture and the project that was mentioned is the Mordecai sock, and I have shown this before. It is a great pattern to work up. There are a few mistakes in the pattern, and everyone is well aware of that. Errata has been published, so if you're interested, you can definitely get all of the corrections before you even start. Personally, I found it easy enough just to figure out what those corrections would be. So the socks, of course, wouldn't be what they are without the fabulous wool that was used to create them. The blue body of the sock is in Little Bean Love's yarn, hand-dyed yarn, and it is the Divination colorway on her everyday sock base. Fantastic, fantastic dyer. And this yarn is exquisite. It has worked up very well, and it's holding up very well. I wear these socks a lot, and it's holding up very well. No noticeable wear to the stitches at all, so that's fantastic. And of course, the little contrasting toe was an unnamed mini by the Wool Baron, a local dyer here in Alberta. So yes, the sock, of course, wouldn't be what it is without the fabulous pattern by Rohn and without the fantastic yarns by Little Bean Loves Crochet and the Wool Baron. So thank you, everybody. And yeah, that's a little bit of news I had. So into what I'm wearing. It's finished. It is my crisscross top project that I had talked about on my last podcast. And it is completed. I'll get a little bit more into the details of it in my finished objects section of this podcast, but it is done, and I have been wearing the heck out of it. I did have to block the heck out of it to begin with to get it to be the right shape and sizes to sew it all together and have it be the crisscross top. But I am totally pleased with how it turned out. and that's what I'm wearing. All right, so all the introductions are underway. We've gotten through my little bit of woohoo news and what I'm wearing, so let's move on to the next segment. All right, so on to finished objects, and I have two of them to share this week. The first I already mentioned in the opening segment of the show, and that is the crisscross top that I am currently wearing. So I did talk about this last podcast, as it was sort of a new project last podcast. And the sweater itself does come out of the boutique style Crochet magazine. Hope it's not getting too much glare from the window. And this is the original picture in the magazine that totally caught my eye. There was just something about this sweater that spoke to me, and immediately I knew that it was going to be something that I had to create. So I did go out and purchased yarn specifically for this project, and that was Drops Flora. Now this is a 65% wool and 35% alpaca blend yarn, and I really did enjoy working with this yarn. It sort of is between a fingerling and a DK weight, but it worked up very nicely. It washed and blocked phenomenally well. The only two things about this yarn that I would caution you against is, first of all, if you have a sensitivity to alpaca or scratchiness in yarn, this will not be the best yarn for you to use for things that are close to the skin. It does have a fair bit of bite to it, and although I am not overly sensitive to the yarn, I can feel it. So for somebody who did have sensitivity, I'm sure it would be an issue. The other thing is, I found this yarn a little difficult to frog. It crocheted up extremely well, was smooth on the needles, was smooth while crocheting the stitches together, but in the one situation I did have a bit of an epic fail with one of the arm panels and had to start it over again. And in pulling out the yarn, it did tangle with itself quite a bit. So caution when frogging this yarn, you are going to have to be gentle. But other than that, I really did enjoy working with it, and I am extremely pleased with the final outcome. So I'm going to stand up a bit and show you this sweater, because I am just so in love with it. So it does have the crisscross detail. The front of the sweater is worked in a large rectangle, which is then folded in half and sewn up the side, and that's what creates this crisscross. It is boxy in its shape, so it's fairly loose in the back, which I enjoy, and about a 3/4 sleeve length, which again is perfect for me. Let me see, what else can I tell you about this other than I love it. I really enjoy it. You know, when I first saw the crisscross, I think that's something that really attracted me to the sweater, but I was a little nervous. I am fairly busty, and I was worried that the crisscross might actually accentuate what does not need any accentuation, and it didn't. This style is actually, I'm finding, quite flattering for my body type, so I am very pleased. And I do already have somebody who has said that they would also like one of these tops, so I have a commission coming with this top as well, so can never go wrong with that. We're just working out what wool we're going to use for that. My other finished object. Remember a couple of podcasts ago I showed you a baby blanket that had 15,000 ends to weave in? I did it. I completed the blanket. The ends are woven. It is finished. Here it is. So it is what I have lovingly called my tulip garden baby blanket. I'm going to hold it up for you to take a better look at. So there it is from behind the baby blanket. So the yarn that this blanket is worked in is 100% acrylic. For things that I list in my Etsy shop, which is where this blanket is going to end up, I do tend to use acrylic for my baby product because not everybody is a fan of the hand wash. And also I'm always a little concerned with the little ones and any wool allergies. It is a fairly common sensitivity and allergen. So you know what? Even if acrylic is a man-made fiber and ultimately it's plastic, from a gifting standpoint, it is usually my fallback. It's just so much easier to take care of. So the yarn that I did use, there's two different types of yarn in it. The yellow and the dark green are loops and thread, snuggly wuggly, and that is available at my local Michael's store in a variety of colors. It is a baby yarn, so it does tend to be in those babyish colors. Now the white and the light green were part of a de-stash that a friend's mom did, and they are in Red Heart Baby TLC. Now that's a yarn that I've never seen in a local store. Now that could be the age of the yarn. I'm not sure how old the yarn was that was being de-stashed, but it was free, so you know, you can't say no to free yarn. And it worked up wonderfully. There was a slight difference in the circumference of the two yarns. The Snuggly Wuggly is a little bit thicker than the TLC, but I think together it worked out quite nicely. So the blanket itself is worked in a tulip stitch and single crochets, and then the border that I put on it is all the way around with a single crochet, then all the way around with a half double crochet, then all the way around with a single crochet, and then I finished it off with a slip stitch detailing along the edge that I think works very, very well with the blanket itself. So ultimately I'm very, very pleased with this. There was no pattern for this blanket. Often I just find a stitch that intrigues me. In this case it was the tulip stitch, and I just go with it. Now, as I said, this blanket is going to end up in my Etsy shop, and that's Rabe Creations on Etsy if you'd care to give it a look. The funny thing is that my Etsy shop started out as a way to justify my projects. Often I find myself very into the process of the crochet project that I'm working on, especially when it comes to blankets. I get the satisfaction from the making of the product, but I'm not always terribly connected or attached to the final product. The crisscross sweater is its own entity. This isn't going anywhere. But a lot of times with the baby blankets, it's the process that really, really fulfilled me. And once it's finished, I don't have a problem with letting go of what I've done. So the Etsy shop was a good way of continuing to sort of make room in my house for new projects. My boys are no longer little boys. They are 23 and 25. So, and neither of them have children on the way or have children yet. So having to stock up on baby blankets and baby clothes is not something that I need to do, but I really, really do enjoy making them. So that was where the whole Etsy shop came from. I mean, now it has grown into a little bit more than that, but that was the humble beginnings of my Etsy shop. Well, those are my two finished projects for this time period, and I'm quite pleased to have two fairly major projects off the hook in a 2-week period, and it has allowed me to start some awesome new projects that I'm going to share with you next. All right, so on to some current projects that I am working on. So the first one I'm going to share with you is living here. Now this is a case of what comes first, the chicken or the egg. In this case, what comes first, the pattern or the yarn? So the pattern that I'm working from comes out of the Interweave Crochet magazine, but it's the summer 2017 edition. So I've had this magazine for almost a full year now. One of the projects in it had caught my eye initially, but I'd never made it before. And then I'll show you the project first. So it is called the Tide Pool Tank, and it's designed by Angela Plunkett. So that is it right there. Again, I hope I'm not getting too much glare for you. It is a basic tank, and it does have some open mesh detailing, sort of a filet crochet detailing along the front, and a section down the back as well. Here is a little bit of a detail of the back panel, the front panel, and then that same panel is repeated down the back. I don't know if you're going to be able to see that well, but trust me, it's gorgeous. And it did intrigue me when I saw it, but I never created it. Then I happened to be in my local Michael's store, and I came across some yarn that was on clearance. And you know, you can never say no to clearance yarn. And here it is. It is Cotton Fair. It's a Premier Yarns product, and it's called Cotton Fair. It is a number 2 weight, and it is 52% cotton and 48% acrylic. Fairly generous in its yardage. In 100 grams, it's giving me 317 yards or 290 meters. And the colorway is called Cloud Gazing. So it's all of these teals and grays and whites and greens, and it really caught my eye. So I scooped up what they had left. So I scooped up 5 balls of this yarn and then went home and started looking through the patterns that I had earmarked as things that were of interest. And to me, the colors in that yarn and a project called Tide Pool went together very, very well. So let me show you what I've done so far. Now, the crochet itself is fairly simple. I did have to go down a hook size to get gauge, and yes, I did gauge this one because I am learning that as much as I hate doing gauge swatches, and it's not the gauge swatch that I don't like, it's that I get so excited to start a new project that I don't want to take the time. It's a waste of time to do a gauge swatch in my mind. Now, I know it's not. I know it's not, especially when you're doing garments. You know, it's kind of nice if they actually, oh, I don't know, fit when you're finished. And I did have a previous epic fail of a garment that came out the size that could fit, oh, I don't know, a giantess. I'm 5'2". So I have learned the hard way that doing a gauge swatch is probably a good thing to do. And I'm glad I did with this project because it would have come out way too big. I did have to go down a whole hook size in order to get gauge. It's a fairly simple pattern. So again, it's worked in panels. Let me see, where's the top? Yeah, we're at the top. So it's worked in panels from the bottom up. So we work from the bottom up until it gets to the mesh detailing, and then the mesh detailing is done. Then you do the back panel. So I'm assuming the back panel will be done in the double crochets, then the panel of mesh, and then the double crochet. So it'll be done row by row, just like this is, and then it's connected at the top. Very, very simple in its construction. But I think for the summer, because it's a cotton weight, it's going to be fairly cool. I do live in southern Alberta in Canada. We do get some very hot weather, don't get me wrong. We do easily get into the 30s in the summer, but it only lasts for a week or two. We spend much more time in the, high teens, low 20s, both in spring and then again in, September, October. We're back into that where this weight will be completely appropriate. as well as our evenings, as opposed to some other places in the world where, you know, it hits that 30 degrees in the day and it stays 30 degrees all night. We are not like that. We are so close to the mountains that when night hits, it cools down significantly, where you'll most often need a jacket at night here in Calgary. So, you know, to be wearing crochet pieces in the summer is not a huge stretch for us. And this will be a sleeveless piece, and I think it's going to be really, really nice with some nice shorts or even a long flowy skirt in potentially white. I'm really liking how this is working up. It is pooling, but I don't mind the pool in this one. Maybe it's the colors, but I'm quite enjoying this. And I do have a little progress keeper on there that actually came free with one of my magazines, and it's a little toadstool. It's really, really cute. Yeah, so that is one of the 2 projects that I currently have on the hook. Well, that I'm currently working on that are on the hook. Let's face it, we all have more works in progress than that. The second one is really quite special. So I have been watching a podcast called Bumblebee Acres Farm for a little while now. They are a yarn dyer out of the States, and they deal mainly in knit. Now, it turned out that Sam, the girl who hosts the podcast, and her family, and they have a family farm, and that's where the yarn is coming from. It's a full-on family farm. They are yarn dyers and pattern designers. They also started out with crochet, although now they're primarily knit. So Sam was saying on her podcast that she was designing a crochet shawl and that she would be potentially looking for some test crocheters. So of course I said, oh, pick me, and she did. So I was very, very pleased that she reached out and asked if I'd like to test crochet her pattern. Of course I said yes. So she sent along the pattern and I started working it up. Now, I have asked her, and I do have permission to be speaking about this on the podcast because the pattern has not released yet. I believe the date that she has chosen, her hard date, is May the 5th. But she has allowed me and said, absolutely, I can speak about it on my podcast and on Instagram where I've already posted it, so you may have already seen this. But this is phenomenal. Now, I know I say that about every project, but this blows my mind. Let me show you. So she's calling the pattern the brioche. Yes, you heard that correctly. So it's almost like brioche, but for crochet, but done in a way that I've never seen it done before. I've seen a lot of people use sort of the slip stitch technique to create sort of that brioche looking crochet. But this is something I've never seen before, so I'm not going to get into the details of how she's done it because it will be a paid pattern, and oh my goodness, it is going to be so worth it. You need to get this if this intrigues you at all. So let me show you. Now it is still a work in progress. I imagine I'm going to get a couple more panels out of this. But holy smoly, guys, check that out. This is amazing. Fully reversible. So it does have that total brioche look. It is completely done in crochet. It has some gorgeous lace detail panels. Oh, how amazing is this? I am so taken by this. This will not be the only one of these that I make. I already have plans to do at least one more. And my mind is going along the rails with, you know, the whole Stephen West and those really super high contrast knit projects he does. I can so see this being used for that. I can't say enough about how wonderful this is. It works up very well. It's not a tough crochet. It can be a little fiddly. because you're working in the way you're working the stitches. Again, I'm not going to go into it because it is a paid for pattern, but oh my goodness, I am completely taken with this. I rant about it to everyone who will listen, as you now know. Now, the yarns I'm using in this I talked about a little while ago, and I had asked on the podcast, and I had a couple of people respond about 2 colorways that I had purchased. So this one is Little Bean Loves, and it is the Queen of Hearts colorway. And this one is Stranded Dye Works, and it is the Anti-Valentine colorway. And I just felt that the 2 of them together were really intriguing because the purple tones are the same with a white base on this one and a black base on this one. So contrasty, but enough elements that were the same to pull it together. And I think that this is showing how well they truly do work together. Now, they are completely different bases. This is an everyday sock, which is a wool nylon blend. This is 100% merino. This is the base is called Solo, so it is a single ply. This is not, but they're playing together so nicely. I am so glad that I put these 2 together, and even more glad that I was able to test this pattern for Sam and use this pattern for these yarns. I think that they work. These yarns, this pattern. Again, that's called the Brioche shawl, and it's by Bumblebee Acres Farms. It will be available on their website, but will also be available through Ravelry, and I strongly recommend that you check this out. It is amazing, and hopefully we'll be seeing more crochet patterns from Sam and her family, because wow, if this is an indicator of what they have to offer, I can hardly wait to see what's next. So the only other work in progress that I thought I might share with you today is a work in progress that is a continuous work in progress and will be a continuous work in progress for some time. If I can find the right project bag. See, there's more than one project bag here. So I talked about my Cozy Memories blanket and how I was using sort of the bits and pieces and odds and ends of my Aran and worsted weight yarns to create a large blanket. Now this one is a blanket for me that will be staying with me in my domicile. And here it is. Now, I lovingly call this blanket, I'm sorry if this offends anybody, but I lovingly call this blanket my fugly blanket because it's just a mishmash of color. But I honestly think that that's what makes it work. Just every time I end a project, if there's not enough yarn that I think I can put into a new project, because I do a lot of baby clothes and stuff, a lot of times the ends can be used again. But if it's a small enough amount that it's not going to work there, I just make an ongoing, never-ending ball using a magic knot until it gets to the size, a good size, and then I spend a couple of evenings doing my granny stitches to make my blanket. Now this is based on the Attic 24 granny stitch blanket that everybody has seen and seems like everybody has done. It's just a nice way to use up those bits and pieces rather than having little tiny balls of yarn everywhere, because, you know, I can't throw yarn away. That would be blasphemy. But yes, so there it is, my lovingly called fugly blanket. Other people might call it a memory blanket, but yes, there it is. So you will see it again, probably a few months from now when some significant progress has been made on it. Yeah, so those are my 3 works in progress that I am sharing with you this podcast. And time to move to the next segment. Alrighty, So moving along into my acquisitions portion of this podcast, and there have been a few. Over the next little while, there will possibly be fewer acquisitions, if only because there are some yarn fairs coming up that I am going to be attending, and therefore I need to put away some cash flow in order to make some purchases at those venues. I did, however, miss one this previous weekend because I was involved in a prior commitment. The fiber shindig did happen actually yesterday, and lots of people have been posting pictures, and I missed it, and I'm sad. But I do have one to go to on May the 12th, and then another one to go to in September. So putting aside some money for the May the 12th, and yeah, but let me show you what I've gotten other than that. So first off, from a late night Etsy order, from Essence of Autumn, who is a new dyer to me, not a new dyer, just a new dyer to me, I purchased 2 skeins. We'll talk about this one first. So, Essence of Autumn, she is a Canadian dyer from Ontario, and she does have an Etsy shop, as I said. This yarn, I really love these colors. I do quite enjoy neutral colors, and this is very much a neutral color. The colorway itself is actually called Oyster Mushroom, which I can totally see. Yeah, it's beautiful. Now, it is a sport weight yarn. I don't do a lot of ordering of hand-dyed sport weight, but this one was just too good to pass up. It is 80% wool and 20% nylon. The base is called Woodland, and it is a fairly rustic base. Yeah, that's the only way I can describe it, is that it is fairly rustic. By that, I don't mean that it's scratchy, just that its presentation is less refined than, say, the other one that I got from her that I'm going to show you as well. But I really, really love this colorway. I love the play of the darks and the lights. There's gray in there, different shades of browns, different neutrals. I think this is going to be gorgeous. Don't have a project in mind for it yet, as most of the yarns that I buy don't come project ready, but that's okay. That's okay. I'm sure that eventually I will find that perfect pattern and I'll say, hey, I've already got the yarn for that. And I will move on. So the second skein that I got, again, from Essence of Autumn, same Etsy shop, is a sock weight yarn, because that is my true love. The base is called Prairie Sock. It is 80% superwash merino and 20% nylon. It is a 3-ply, so there is, let me see here, 420 yards in this skein. The color is called Hibiscus Tea, and it's got, you know, pinks, sort of all the way from a very, very pale pink to a very, very intense pink, and some beautiful speckling as well. So these, I believe, will probably end up as socks with a nice contrast toe and possibly heel and maybe even cuff. But yeah, I was quite intrigued with the varying shades in this one. Lots of pinks, and I'm not always drawn to pinks, but I have been more lately than I have ever been before. So again, I'm always intrigued to try out new dyers, and I will talk to you more about this yarn when it's in a project. So one other purchase that I did make, again through Etsy. Now, I heard of this shop from another podcast I was watching. I believe it was Cozy Up with the Stitching Sisters. They are 4 sisters in northern Alberta who do a knitting podcast, and I watch that one. They're a hoot to watch if you ever get a chance and you haven't yet. And they were mentioning a Etsy maker, and her shop is called Ginger Snap. So I went to go take a look, and I found this. Now, I am a huge Stephen King fan. Of all the fandoms out there, I think the Stephen King fandom for me and the Harry Potter fandom for me are the 2 big ones. Those are the ones that I can speak to, and that, you know, sort of I live and breathe. I have read every Stephen King book multiple times. I think he's a phenomenal author, and this project bag just spoke to me. So it is a small bag, more of a sock or small shawl, fingerling weight type of a bag size, but it is taller than most. So it does have that little bit of extra room. But if you look at the pattern, so in the middle, first of all, these people are all sitting around a table playing on a Ouija board, and we have Stephen King in the middle, and we have some of his more famous characters. We have Carrie, the clown from It, Jack Torrance from The Shining, and Annie from Misery. If we look on the table, there's a dog bone here that I am going to guess is for Cujo, and a set of car keys here that I'm going to guess are for Christine, and the clown is actually reading a Creepshow comic book. This is absolutely phenomenal. I couldn't not order this, and it does come with a progress keeper, a zip pull, and it is a little headstone that says R.I.P. on it, so rest in peace. I love this. This is truly me. My brioche shawl has been living in here. Oh, inside is just a nice striped fabric as well. My brioche shawl has been living in here and traveling with me to and from work. And as soon as people at work have seen this bag, they immediately rave, and they know that it was definitely a purchase that I needed to make. So those have been my acquisitions as of late. All right, so let's journey on over to the bookshelf. So please indulge me with a bit of a detour on the way to the bookshelf, because there was one other yarn acquisition that I made that I wanted to talk about, because it was a complete and total epic fail. It does happen. The reason I'm mentioning this isn't to diss the yarn at all, because I should know better. I've struggled with this in the past, but it's potentially to get some help. So, the yarn that I'm speaking of is called Bernat Mix Home. Again, available at Michael's. And this yarn truly intrigues me. So it is made up of 4 different types of yarn. There is a regular acrylic type yarn. There is a more of a t-shirty type yarn. There is this one here that is sort of all loops and bobbles. And then there is a section that is eyelash. And the 4 sections repeat over and over and over again. Now, I have avoided buying this because I have had issues in the past with attempting to crochet with highly textured yarn. It rarely works for me. However, I did see a tutorial on YouTube that used this yarn to create pillow covers. So I thought, you know what, it can be done. So I followed the tutorial to the letter, and it did not work. The regular yarn and the t-shirt yarn, super easy to work with. Once you get into the bobbly yarn, it becomes a lot more difficult to work with. You really can't see your stitches, but I did all right. However, my biggest nemesis was this eyelashy yarn. By the time I finished the eyelash yarn, the project had completely pulled together. I hadn't missed stitches because I'd continued to count, but something terribly wonky had gone on with my gauge. It was just unsalvageable. And then I tried to frog it. Impossible. Absolutely impossible to frog. It ended up just breaking. So I tossed the project to the side and have not looked at it again. The question is, has anyone else used this and had any success doing crochet with this yarn? Now, it does have a crochet hook size suggestion on the yarn, which to me means that you should be able to crochet with it. And the hook size that I was using was the recommended size. So it's not like I went down a couple of hook sizes and shouldn't have been able to work with it. I don't tend to have super tight tension or super loose tension. My tension tends to be fairly good. And I'm really disappointed because I really, really, really want to work with this. I am so intrigued by this yarn, and it was a complete and total, epic, utter, total, horrendous fail. So if anybody else has worked with this and has any suggestions, send them my way. I would be very grateful in knowing if you had any success with this yarn. So now, let's travel to the bookshelf. And the book that I'm talking to you about this week is by Neil Gaiman, and it's called American Gods. This is not a new book. This book was originally published, I believe, in 2001. Although this is not the version of the book that was published in 2001. So the book became a fairly big seller, and for its 10-year anniversary, they did a 10th anniversary edition of the book, which was slightly different than the original book in its presentation and in its content, which Neil Gaiman supported completely, obviously. But he really wanted more people to be exposed to that anniversary edition, which he felt was a superior product to the first edition. But then he looked at the two editions, and he actually reworked the book. So this book actually has more content to it than any other version of the book that has previously been published. Confusing, I know. But this book has also just recently been made into a series on, it might be Netflix. I don't watch a lot of TV. And it has sort of gained more popularity and more momentum again. So I decided to reread it and reread this version. I had originally read the first published version of the book. And it's a tome. There's over 700 pages in here. It is a journey. It is definitely a commitment to literature, but so well worth it. The premise of the story speaks of the old gods who traveled to America in the hearts and in the minds and in the imagination of the people who travel to America. They are at war with the new American gods, which are like the gods of media, the gods of political correctness, the gods of current cultural norm. So there is a bit of a conflict going on between the old gods and the new gods. And it's such an amazing concept and such a well-written book. Neil Gaiman has a definite voice. He is a true storyteller, and he can take you on journeys, and this is a journey. I do recommend this book for anyone who is interested in mythology, even if it's not necessarily fiction that you tend to read, or science fiction or fantasy, if those aren't places that you normally go. But you are more interested in mythology, you may very well be interested in this. People who are interested in cultural studies would be very interested in this book as well. So again, taking people who normally would read in a non-fiction genre of cultural studies, just because this does deal so much with the culture of America into today's society, or even comparative religions. So if you're interested in the old religions and how they changed and became newer religions, or how concepts have carried over from the old to the new, this is really an intriguing book, and one that I do highly recommend. So if you like any of those things, or if you're just a huge fantasy fan, definitely consider American Gods by Neil Gaiman as your next read. So that's all I have for you for episode number 5. Thank you if you've stuck around this long. And again, I'd like to thank all of my new subscribers. I am thrilled with the number of subscribers I have. And in true podcaster fashion, I am looking at running a giveaway once I hit that 100 subscribers threshold. So potentially if things continue going the way they are, the next podcast episode, oh my goodness, it is time to wrap this up today. I can't talk anymore. So the next podcast episode will be including a giveaway that I will introduce on that episode, if, of course, we reach that 100 subscribers. So if you haven't subscribed yet, by all means, please press that subscribe button. It does help for this video to be shared with others who may not have seen it yet. And a like, a thumbs up is always a positive thing as well. Now, if you're looking for me outside of the YouTube universe, I am on Ravelry as Rabe Creations. Now, I did attempt to create a Ravelry group for this podcast, and it didn't work. Which doesn't surprise me because I often have challenges, we'll call it, with technology. But I am going to try again. But for now, there is no Ravelry group for this podcast, but you can find me on Ravelry, and I am fairly active there. My projects page is expanding exponentially, so by all means, give it a visit. On Instagram, I am Nicole_Rabe Creations, so come check me out there as well. I do have my Etsy shop, as I've talked about, and it is called Rabe Creations. And finally, I am also on Facebook, so you can find me there as well. All right, I think that's all I have to talk to you about. Again, thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon, in another 2 weeks or so. All right, bye now.